Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of You Could Hi to Kolob podcast. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're in the Doctrine and Covenants, but it's set up a bit differently, isn't it? It's not quite Doctrine and Covenants. It's a bit of Doctrine and Covenants, bit of Joseph Smith history, and I think it's just going to cycle through this for the next year, bit of back and forth.
Yeah, it's definitely doctrine mixed with the history of the church, which I really like. There's a good attempt. I think the curriculum is a really good attempt to teach people about the history, our history, and how we got to where we are, and not skipping over some of the challenges that the early saints faced. So I really like the material, and I'm really excited to get into it this year. So we're not covering Doctrine and Covenants at all. We're covering Pearl of Great Price. Actually, we're covering Joseph Smith history, verse 1 to verse 26. Yeah, so we're actually I don't know what you've got prepared, Clive, but I don't have any references into the Doctrine and Covenants. So yeah, it's Pearl of Great Price today.
Yeah, and the Joseph Smith side of it. So should we get
Yeah,
into it? I got a quote from Joseph Smith, actually.
go for it.
Well, actually, it's not directly from Joseph Smith. It's in Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith. It says, God has not revealed anything to Joseph, but what he will make known unto the 12, and even the least saint may know all things as fast as he is able to bear them. For the day must come when no man need to say to his neighbor, Know ye the Lord? For all shall know him who remain, from the least to the greatest. So everything's been revealed, but it's basically, as we're going to discuss over the next year, revelations come in at different times with the times that people are prepared for them. So, imagine if all revelations came in at once, the church would just be an absolute chaos going, okay, we need to sort out tithing, we need to sort out baptisms for the dead, we need to sort out this and that, sacrament and this, and it would just be chaos. So the Lord
Yeah,
reveals it.
who passes the sacrament? Who prepares the
Yeah,
sacrament?
exactly.
Who gives talks? Who assigns a talk?
And then Joseph
Yeah,
be
there's
like,
a
I
lot.
need an angel to come down and talk me through everything again because I've forgotten it all. So it's all given in its own time, and it's all given together, when needed.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I guess, Clive, I just thought I would start by giving a bit of a breakdown of what we're looking at here. So like I said at the start, we're looking at verse 1 to verse 26. Verse 1 to 6 is Joseph highlighting a couple of things. He goes into his family's history, and then he talks about the religious confusion. So that's the first part of it, his family's history and religious confusion. The second part, which is really verse 7 to verse 12, is the influence of James 1:5. And I've got a little bit about that today as well. But James 1:5 and his decision to go in prayer. And then he goes into the adversary, the opposition that he feels when he goes to pray. We'll talk about a couple of the different versions of the Joseph Smith history of detail that we get about Satan trying to stop Joseph from praying. And then verse 17, 18, and 19 is the first vision. And then 20 to 26 is kind of post first vision and what's happening in the area at that time. So yeah, there's really there's really 5 different topics to go through for this lesson. I don't know how much we'll cover, but there's really 5 different segments or sections of the lesson today.
Just Smith history, it's good. We'll get into it in a minute, but I remember teaching this guy on my mission, and straight away he said to me, okay, how old was Joseph when he received the first vision? I said, 14, of course, because I've rehearsed it 50,000 times. So he's 14 years
Right.
old. And he said, well, I have another copy here when Joseph said that he was in the 16th year. So he's either 15 or 16. Straight away, I know that Joseph Smith isn't a true prophet because he lied just on that simple fact. So,
Right.
Daniel, I want to ask you, because you're more into this history side of it, if you can help me understand some of this stuff. So, start off with Joseph Smith history. Halfway through verse 1, he says, I have been induced to write this history to dispute the public mind and put all inquiries after truth in possession of the facts. So straight away, he's sort of gone, all right, let me get this all out. But how far into him being a prophet did he go, let me get this all out? Because we know that there's multiple times that he's given the first vision to people, but now he's actually
Yeah.
sat down. Where are we at? Like, what stage is the church at? Why did Joseph decide? Okay, I really have to put this down now. What are we looking at here?
So this version that we've got here didn't come about till 1838, 1839. This is the third crack at writing the history of the church, or Joseph's history of the first vision. The first attempt he has is in 1832. He records in a very personal journal. I find that version very wordy. Joseph, it feels to me, is trying to elaborate or try to use words that maybe he's not so comfortable with, but bigger words, and that version is quite wordy. But the version is for him. It's a private copy for him. It's like if you have something really spiritual in your life and you record it in your journal, you're not assuming that in 50 years or 10 years or 5 years that someone's going to read that. That's a personal thing for you to review. Then we have the next version, which is a little bit later, actually, and it comes about because there's a Jewish minister, or a Jewish self-proclaimed prophet. His name is Joshua, the Jewish minister, or Robert Matthews is his name, and he walks into Joseph Smith's house, and Joseph Smith educates him on what happened during the first vision, and this is the 1835 account. This account is meant for other people, and it has far more detail in it than we get from the 1838 Joseph Smith history section. When Joseph Smith is talking to Robert Matthews, he's telling him that he's one person comes down before the other. He talks about he gives more detail about what's actually said to him. And this to me, it's like an attempt to humanize it a little bit more. It's an attempt to humanize what Joseph's going through. And then, of course, we get the 1838, and then we've got an 1842, which is a very brief summary. It's what's called the Wentworth letter. It's a reply to a newspaper, a very brief summary about the first vision. So in this case, this one here we have of 1838, Joseph Smith's been through a lot. Like, he's been through a lot when he writes this 1838 version. The opposition to the church in 1838 is peak. It's peak opposition. It doesn't get more peak. It now just stays at the peak all the way through to Joseph Smith's martyrdom. The extermination order from Governor Boggs is given. I don't know if Horns Mill massacre has occurred at this time. It might have. I'm not that savvy on the history, but there is a lot. Josh Smith, of course, has been tarred and feathered. He's had multiple dead children. He's been in court, in and out of court more than 50 times, I would suggest, probably more. So this is a version where he's almost saying, I need to get something down into the public, and hopefully they'll take it for what it is, and they'll stop abusing the members of the church for what I'm saying happened.
I read the second part, and to me, it's him going, this is what we need to know for this church to go on. Like you said, I'll just read it first. In this history, I shall present the various events in relation to this church. So to me, he's gone, I don't need to go into all the exact details of what's happened. For in relation to this church, here's the basics of what you need to know. So he doesn't need to say, one came down, introduced another, angels came down and were singing and praise God. Like, let's just go basic. This is what happened in
Yeah.
relation to what we need to know for the church. But it gives, like, people are trying to pull apart the first vision over and over, but it seemed to ignore the mass rest of it. He talks about his siblings and his parents and the churches they went to, and the subject of, religion was massive at the time, and then even what happens after that. So there's so much in there in relation to what we need to know for this church to go on. If you believe Joseph Smith saw God and Jesus, well then, you can continue on and be baptized and then do all the things that you believe. So yeah, from what you've said, obviously he's, the first few he's talked to people and it's been recorded. terrible things happen in the church, and he's gone, all right, I just need to get it down so people understand the basics of how we started and what this church is all about.
There's a couple of things that I wanted to give a good. We're going to use this material as well. We can of course reference the other accounts, but there's a couple of things that I wanted to give a bit of, just a bit of clarification on, because there is the human side behind what Joseph Smith is saying here. He talks about in verse 6, notwithstanding the great love which the converts of these different faiths expressed at the time of their conversion, and the great zeal manifested by the respective clergy, who were active in getting up and promoting this extraordinary scene of religious feeling in order to have everybody converted, as they were pleased to call it, let them join what sect they pleased. Yet when the convert began to file off, some to one party and some to another, it was seen that this seemingly good feeling of both the priests and the converts were more pretended than real. For a scene of great confusion and bad feeling ensues, priests contending against priests, convert against convert, so that all their good feelings one for another, if they ever had any, were entirely lost in a strife of words and a contest about opinions. Joseph Smith, he's aware of these traveling ministers, or even the ministers that live locally to his area. There's three ministers, Clive, that are the most influential. I'm gonna say the most influential in the young Joseph's life. The first one that maybe more people know about is the minister at Alvin Joseph Smith's brother dies, and there's a minister by the name of Jesse Townsend. And this minister, he says Alvin's going to go to hell because he's not a member of the church. So he basically is going to go to hell. And anyone who isn't a member of the church is going to go to hell. So Joseph Smith is aware of this. Then there's another minister, a guy called Reverend Stockton. Reverend Stockton he's Presbyterian. He arranges one of these convert sessions, these revival sessions, where he invites the Baptists and the Methodists to join him as a Presbyterian to speak to the people of the area. And Joseph Smith Sr. was there. Joseph Smith Sr. attended this revival. And at the end, lots of people are feeling really good. And they're feeling like, this is awesome. This is so good. We're going to join the church. And they say, hey, Reverend Stockton, there's Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians here. We feel good. We're believing something. We're going to join a church. And Reverend Stockton gets up and he says, well, I organized this. I'm the president of this little get together. Therefore, yous are all going to join Presbyterian. And Joseph Smith Sr. never liked this Reverend Stockton too much. So he ignores Reverend Stockton and he doesn't agree to join the church at that time. The next day, there's another traveling minister. This guy's a Methodist. His name's Reverend George Lane. And Reverend George Lane, he gives a sermon called "Which Church Should I Join?" And in this sermon, he tells people, hey, read James 1:5, and you should put this to practice. You should read James 1:5 and you should understand what it is. Later on, there's a couple of people that write specifically about George Lane and the influence George Lane had in Joseph Smith's life. One particular is William Smith, his brother. William Smith says that on the way home from this meeting that Joseph Smith attended and listened to Reverend Lane, he said Joseph Smith couldn't stop reading James 1:5. And Oliver Cowdery, of course, who doesn't meet Joseph Smith till much later on in life, 10, 15 years, whatever it is later. Joseph Smith obviously spoke a lot about Reverend Lane because Oliver Cowdery would later on say that he had a lot of influence on Joseph. And he called him he said that he was the elder, I think he said, just from memory here. He said he was the presiding elder potentially of the Methodist sect. So these people had a big influence on Joseph. Jesse Townsend, from a very negative perspective, Alvin's going to go to hell. Reverend Stockton, who arranges arranges a meeting between the Baptist, Methodist, and Presbyterian, which was really common, by the way, back then. And then Reverend George Lane, who comes the next day and says, which church should you join? Well, you should read James 1:5 and figure it out. So that's the context behind what Joseph Smith is talking about here. He talks about there was great excitement. We know that there's something called the Great Awakening, which I think you'll know a bit more about than me, but there's the Great Awakening where there's lots of religions going around. Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, they're so good at promoting themselves that they travel around converting people. Notable people in our church's history were part of these other religions: Sidney Rigdon, Brigham Young, Parley P. Pratt, all part of these other religions that end up getting converted. In fact, Sidney Rigdon, if I'd thought about this earlier, he he's from a large congregation, and a large amount of of this congregation ends up becoming members. So that's the context behind what Joseph Smith is talking about.
If I wanted to start a religion and so did 50 other people, you would go, okay, well, the way I'm going to hook everyone is say, there's only a heaven, there's only a hell. If you don't join my religion, you're going to hell. Straight away, people would go, well, I don't want that. No one's going to go, there's three heavens, or we have the Bible, but the Book of Mormon is more important. No one's going to go, oh, okay, well, I'll join that one. They'll all go, well, that seems way too easy, so with this religious excitement going on, it's all going to be doom and gloom. And, whether you join me or not, there's, I can think of maybe 5 other religions that don't believe in a hell. And a lot of them didn't start till later. The Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, they didn't start till the late 1800s, or that,
Right.
they didn't actually become a religion till early 1900s. So yeah, there's this great excitement. It was very much, there was some people who believed in what they were saying, but there was a lot of others who just wanted a big congregation. So it's a difficult time because no one there is going, God loves us all and whatever you choose is good. They're all going, well, you need to join my religion, you need to join mine. So it would have been a very, very difficult time for everyone to really try and figure out what was right. So I guess when Joseph Smith says something like what you read, and halfway through 6, it was seen that the seemingly good feelings of both the priests and the converts were more pretend than real. I feel like that's more, going towards that direction. I feel like I should be here because I don't want to go to hell, sort of thing. So
Right.
yeah, difficult time.
I'm here to avoid I'm here to avoid the negative as
Exactly.
opposed to being part of the positive.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not here because religion is good for me. I'm here because I don't want to burn in hell in the end.
Interesting.
So, all right. So that's sort of the early start to it, of
Yeah.
why things were. So then Joseph Smith, I guess it's hard because, we've all heard the story 50,000 times. So should we talk about the first vision? And can I ask you, in your opinion, could you
Mm.
tell us how you think, with all of the ones you've heard, how you
Yeah.
think the first vision might have actually gone down? Instead of just, what we read with, darkness comes and then God and Jesus come and say, this is my son, hear him. Like, can you
Yeah.
give us a step by step of what you think with all the ones you've put together?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I don't know, and this is the gospel according to Daniel, but what I think is happening is it starts in verse 12. Never did any passage of scripture come with more power to this heart of man than this did at this time to mine. So he's talking about James 1:5. He's really reading it a lot. William Smith said on the way home he reads it a ton. He gets home, he reads it a ton. And then he decides to put it to the test. And he doesn't just walk out into the field. He's left again. This is the gospel according to Daniel, but he's left an axe in a tree stump, and it's highly possible that he wanders out to that particular tree stump. He knows where he's left the axe, so it's very very possible that he walks out there, and as he's walking out, hell, Satan, is aware of the magnitude of what is about to happen. Satan himself knows if Joseph Smith can pray, the end for him and the beginning of us is all about to happen.
Which I might just, if you don't mind, it's interesting at that point because Satan traditionally in the Bible comes after the people have seen God. when they're weak because of
Right.
the light and life that's been drawn from them to see God, Satan normally comes at their weakest time. So for Satan to come now, like you said, right before, obviously it's a panic move.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He is in stress town. He's stressed.
Yeah.
He's enjoyed 1800 years of apostasy. He's enjoyed just people doing the craziest things in the name of a creator. So now though, now he's got issues. And so he comes and Joseph Smith records that and this is when he's talking to Robert Matthews or Joshua the Jewish minister. He records that he hears footsteps behind him. So he goes to pray, he hears footsteps and he jumps up and he looks around, he can't see anyone. So clearly there is a presence of someone else. Joseph Smith is saying that he can hear someone walking. So he goes down, he goes down to pray again, and now his tongue is swollen. He's physically been affected by the opposition, by the adversary is physically affecting him, not just tempting him, not just not hoping that he doesn't do it, or he's actually now changing the physicality of Joseph Smith, binding his tongue, swelling his tongue so he can't speak. So he begins to pray, and one thing that I would say is he previously records that he's convinced that he's sinful. He's convinced that he's got sin and that he's got too much sin. And so he goes to pray. What he actually says, not real sure, but he's wrestling to pray. At a point in time, and what we don't know is how long was he wrestling for? Was he wrestling for half an hour? Was he wrestling for 1 minute? Was he wrestling for an hour? Was he wrestling for a long time? But he says that as the darkness came around him, he felt like it was all over. He'd tried his hardest, and it was now all over. I think even in our Joseph Smith history, it says that he says that he was doomed to sudden destruction. He goes to call upon God, and out of nowhere, he's rescued. A light appears, and someone comes down. One person comes down first, and if I'm talking about what I think happened based on all of the histories put together, the first words to Joseph are, Joseph, thy sins are forgiven thee. And Joseph then feels the weight of sin. One appears, and then God the Father appears, and then Jesus Christ comes down second. He's introduced and comes down second. Joseph says that it's so bright that he actually thinks that he actually first of all thought that it was fire. He describes it as that it's so bright that he thinks everything's going to be consumed by this light or this fire. He writes fire in one of the histories, and then he kind of puts a line through it and he writes the word light. So he first of all describes it as fire. And even Oliver Cowdery, when Oliver Cowdery is describing it, Oliver Cowdery later in the 1840s puts something together of Joseph Smith history, because we've got these four accounts, but we've got five other separate secondhand accounts of what's happened. So Oliver Cowdery later on talks about that everything's overcome with this light. And so then there's a conversation in the 1835 account to Joshua the Jewish minister. There's lots said. Joseph Smith goes into some detail about what's said to him, and of course then he's told don't join any churches and just go into a holding pattern. And at a point in time, we'll come together in the future and we'll let you know what's going on. Joseph Smith then wakes up and he finds himself on his back, and then goes inside, walks back inside, kind of mission accomplished. He's kind of a bit dazed. His mother says to him, what's wrong, Joseph? And he says something like, mother, I'll be all right. Or, don't worry about me, kind of thing. And then takes off.
Do you know why? I mean, and this might just be speculation because we don't know Joseph Smith personally, but do you know why he was a bit hesitant to run home and explain to his parents what had just happened? Do you think he needed to understand it fully himself, or do you think he needed to wait, or was he instructed to wait and just not say anything for a little while? Because I mean, Moroni told him to go tell his dad straight away.
I think this is an easy one, and I think I'll tell you why. But first of all, I think that something that Joseph Smith cops a lot of flack over is why didn't he just write all this down and go and tell everyone? And what a miraculous event. If you and people who are listening to this podcast, if you think about the most spiritual thing that's happened to you, think about the moment you felt the closest to heaven, maybe you've had something really, really spiritual happen to you. How quickly are you to run and tell everyone? How quickly are you to let everyone know that actually, no, this has happened and this is the most spiritual thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm going to now go tell everyone ASAP. Like, in my opinion, that just doesn't happen. I don't think, I don't know if Joseph was told not to tell anyone. Obviously, when Moroni comes later on, Moroni says, tell your dad. But is Joseph told not to tell anyone? I'm not sure. But what I do believe from my own experiences and people I know who have shared incredibly spiritual things with me is that the first thing that happens to you when you have a spiritual moment isn't, I don't know what it is, but what it isn't is quickly running and telling every single person 5 seconds later.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge we have here because we only get a little bit from Joseph Smith himself. Why would he tell us all of it? This is something that's so spiritual that happened to him that if he told us more, would we believe him more? I'm not sure. If he says actually, like if he came here today and said, "Hey, Daniel and Clive, you guys are great guys and you study the church a lot. I'm going to tell you everything." Do we now go, "Okay, mate, well we believe you more?" Does the opposition stop now? Do people believe him because he now tells us everything much quicker? Or actually, do we just find something else to bag him out over and to hate him? Do we find some other reason why he's not telling the truth? I think that's more the issue here.
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I think that's perfect the way you said it. You're right. I said at the beginning, Joseph Smith wrote Joseph Smith history because this is the basics that we need to know. And you're right. If he put in every single detail, would it matter? Would it change anything? Well, no. If we believe what he's written here, that's what we need to know. And then we need to get our own personal experiences after that. So, yeah,
Right.
well said, I think. Perfect.
There's a chance that we do know everything that Joseph was told. There's a chance that in the Doctrine and Covenants, there's revelations that are recorded that Joseph knew about or was taught more about later on that maybe he was taught about in the first vision. We just simply don't know.
Yeah.
So it is a challenging one, but there's a, when hopefully the time comes and we can meet Joseph Smith and say thank you so much for everything you've went through and what you've done for us. Hey, what else happened during the first vision? He might go, hey guys, turn to Doctrine and Covenants 50.
It does say many other things which they did say unto me, which I cannot write at this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're right. Yeah. There's a lot
At this time.
at this time. All right.
The other really interesting thing, Clive, is the date. I'm not going to talk about this too much, but there's a lot of work way, way, way back in 2002 by John C. Lefgren, and then earlier on work by John P. Pratt. And they do a lot of work around, well, what is the date? And both of them separately come to March the 26th. It's a Sunday. March the 26th is the date that they both come to through various different means. Weather is one, and the season of what their jobs were. They were collecting sap from sugar cane, I think it might have been, or something. But there's a bit of work done, and yeah, both of these two gents come up with Sunday, March the 26th as the date. Yeah, which I thought was quite interesting.
I wonder if anything else happened in the world that day. Like, you look it up and there's nothing really specific that happened. There's a lot that happened in around the same year, but that particular date, like, you've got to mention, like, God has come down to earth with his son. The light and the
Yeah.
glory that would have been around would have affected a lot of people, you'd think. So I wonder, like, knowledge and, just anything else, you'd think, just a little bit of the glory of God being close to you, some other people must have been affected somehow. I mean, I got no facts on that, but I just wonder, the glory of God being here. I wonder if there was other people that were affected in some kind of way and felt something.
Yeah, it would be interesting actually to review. Maybe someone's already done that work, but that would be very interesting actually to understand that a bit closer.
Yeah. All right. So what's next? So we've seen the first vision. We've seen that he's gone home. What are we talking about next?
Well, okay, so he has this first vision, and then he does go to tell people after some time. He does then go and tell people, "Hey, I've done what a minister said. I've asked God, and God's revealed some things to me." And of course, Joseph faces immense opposition. And of course, why wouldn't he? If these ministers, it's their occupation. It's not like in the church where we get callings and the time is quote unquote voluntary, but it's their occupation to be traveling ministers or to be ministers in the local area. And it doesn't go well when Joseph says, I've spoke to God, like I kind of did what you guys said, and it was great. Thanks. And thanks for that. And they're kind of gone, huh?
Yeah.
No, that's a bad thing. We don't want you to, we don't want the heavens open to you. We need everyone to keep coming to us. We're the authorities to God. Not everyone can be the authority to God, because then what do you need me for? And you need to keep paying me. I don't want to go get a normal job cutting forests down. Like, don't go to God. We can't have that happen. And so he says that there was communication, or what he says to them was treated, where he says at one stage it was treated lightly, but actually he was ridiculed. And the persecution of Joseph Smith's life starts now and ends in his death. It doesn't start now, get easy, and then life is good. No, Joseph Smith from this point on is ridiculed, he's bullied, he's physically abused, he's incarcerated, friends turn on him, he's the subject of national interest. He at one stage goes and meets with President Martin Van Buren. From this point on, Joseph Smith is, like he says, is for very good, and he's for very very bad as well. And so he gets ridiculed by the local priests at the time. I don't know how long this took or which ministers would have been there. We don't have any evidence to say that he went back to George Lane and said, "Thanks, George, for telling me about James 1:5." We don't have that at all. My my own personal assumption is that Joseph, after some time, that when he came to grips with what happened, he then went and spoke to people. I don't think it would have been the next day. So perhaps those traveling ministers, this Reverend Stockton and George Lane and Jesse Townsend, they could have all have easily have moved on to other areas, to other counties to be preaching. But I'm not sure on that detail. But this is where it all goes really, really wrong for him. And it's summed up, Clive, in verse 25. And it's a long verse, but I'll read the whole thing. "So it was with me. I had actually seen a light, and in the midst of that light, I saw two personages, and they did in reality speak to me. And though I was hated and persecuted for saying that I had seen a vision, yet it was true. And while they were persecuting me, reviling me, and speaking all manner of evil against me, falsely, for so saying, I was led to say in my heart, why persecute me for telling the truth? I have actually seen a vision, and who am I that I can withstand God, that I can withstand God? Or why does the world think to make me deny what I have actually seen? For I had seen a vision, I knew it, and I knew that God knew it, and I could not deny it, neither dared I do it. At least I knew that by doing so I would offend God and come under condemnation." So Joseph Smith here in 1838, there's a literal extermination order that says, if drive the Mormons out of this state or kill them. Either one is legal. And he's saying here at the end, no matter what is going on, at no point in time am I going to deny what I've seen, because I'm more afraid of coming under condemnation from God than I am of what's happening here on the earth. This is actually so small in compared to the grand plan of Jesus Christ. What a testimony to have.
So at this stage, about 32 years old right now writing this. Back then, he was about 14, 15, somewhere around there. Do we know, like he was saying that he was hated and persecuted? Do we know what happened between this and when he saw Moroni? Like, in between, did he continue to say to people, even though he's headed for it, I have seen a vision? Or did he sort of keep it to himself after he realized people are going to hate him for it?
I don't think we have any record of him saying, okay, specifically, I'm going to stop talking about it now. We definitely have record of him telling people, and there's definitely record of the abuse that he gets for telling people.
For
Um,
years before he gets a place?
I
Or before he sees Moroni, sorry, because then I guess it would spur a whole new, bring up all those things again by the people. Oh, now you're saying this, now you're saying there's plates.
Yeah, I don't. There's a good question. Maybe I need to dig into that a little bit more of how long it went for, but I believe it went for the whole time.
Right.
I believe that in the town he was known for having this vision and being persecuted for it. And I don't think they got to. I don't know, but I don't think. Or there's no record of anyone going, all right, we've kind of teased him enough now. Don't worry about it. Leave him alone.
Yeah, it didn't
We
burn
only
out.
have record that
Yeah.
yeah, we only have record that this persecution, this abuse happened over a sustained period of time.
Right. A difficult time. It just would have been difficult. Like he's saying, I knew it. I knew God knew it. And, why persecute me for something? Why hate me? Like there's so many other religions that are saying, this is the only way. This is this. I am a prophet. Like you said, that Jewish guy who claimed he was a prophet. Like Joseph Smith sort of going, well, I mean, I'm not far off what everyone else is saying. Like, why persecute me for that? And it just shows you the adversary working even harder in that direction. And for a
Yeah.
14-year-old boy to be like, well, I mean, I've seen it. I know that it definitely happened. And I can't now go around saying, all right, never mind, it didn't happen.
Well, that Joshua, the Jewish minister, that Robert Matthews, he was tried for murder. He was put in jail at one stage. He whipped his daughter. He was not a good dude. Yeah, he was a self-proclaimed prophet. But Joseph Smith, you're right to your point, has a stellar record. Like, what's no one's got any reason to go, well, he's a bad person. There became an obsession. It's the only way I can think about it. There became an obsession in the area with Joseph Smith and with his story. And when we talk about, I don't know what episode we're going to talk about him actually getting the plates, but there became the obsession with him in the town increased tenfold. People were always watching him, and then when he said, "I've got the plates now," people tried to rob him. Like there was a real obsession with abusing Joseph Smith, a real obsession with following Joseph Smith, trying to steal from Joseph Smith. That the town was obsessed with him in a very, very negative way.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's more to the story. We don't get much more until later in February when we start talking about the rest. But yeah, I guess we sort of this lesson ends unless there's a bit more you want to talk about.
Well, I've got just one newspaper article, which was a conversation between a reporter, a reporter called Briggs and William Smith. William Smith ends up, he was the last one to die, I think, of the siblings. And it's a whole newspaper article. It's really cool. If anyone wants to check it out, do so. This is just a snippet of it. This Briggs asks William, "Did you not doubt Joseph's testimony sometimes?" And this is William Smith, who testified against Joseph Smith that would see him go to jail. This is William Smith, who massively fell out with Joseph
Even fought with him physically, fought with him.
for physical fights.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't know, he was he was one of the reasons why he ended up going to Carthage. So they did not have a relationship at all. But this is what was said. So he said, "Did you not doubt Joseph's testimony sometimes?" And William Smith later on, this is, I'm going to say 25 years after Joseph's died, he says, "No, no," was the reply. "We all had the most implicit confidence in what he said. He was a truthful boy. Father and mother believed him. Why should not the children? I suppose if he had told crooked stories about other things, we might have doubted his word about the plates. But Joseph was a truthful boy. That father and mother believed his report. and suffered persecution for that belief shows that he was truthful. No, sir, we never doubted his word for 1 minute. And all of these, there's so many of these testimonies of people who loved Joseph or hated Joseph, fell out with Joseph, and none close to Joseph would say the Book of Mormon is not true, or the witnesses would never say no, there was no angel. The witnesses who touched the plates would never say no, I never saw the plates. Never, never, not once would anyone go on to doubt the prophet. It's just an incredible story, and how grateful I am to be studying it this year. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of You Could Hide to Color podcast. Catch us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and we will see you next week.